The first time I saw the mark, it wasn't blood or claw or anything dramatic. It was a damp fingerprint on a hospital mirror, pressed from the inside, as if someone had been trapped behind the glass. The second time, it was a bruise-shaped handprint on my arm that hadn't been there when I woke up. By the seventh, I understood the rule. The dead don't always haunt you with screams. Sometimes they leave proof. If you enjoy true horror stories whispered from the dark, don't forget to subscribe, if you dare. Welcome to Mr. BlackWhisper. I was 2 months into the night shift at a private clinic when it started quiet. Procedural nights, fluorescent lights that never warmed the skin, and the kind of silence that made every sound feel like a mistake. Room 3 had been empty since a patient died there the week before. Nobody talked about it. In places like that, you learn quickly what not to ask. But I still did my rounds, checking doors, checking monitors, checking the little rules that keep a building from turning into a problem. At 2:17 a.m., I passed the staff bathroom and noticed the mirror looked fogged. That didn't make sense. The air was dry. The heat was low. There was no shower running. I stepped inside and saw it clearly, a single handprint, perfectly formed on the mirror as if someone had pressed their palm into steam. 5 fingers, a thick heel, even the fine lines in the skin. It wasn't smeared like a prank. It wasn't sloppy like condensation. It looked place, deliberate, like a signature. I wiped it once with paper towel. The fog vanished, but the print stayed darker than the rest of the glass. I wiped harder. It wouldn't lift, it didn't scratch, it didn't move. Then I realized something that turned my stomach cold. The handprint was on the inside. I found myself staring at my own reflection, feeling watched from behind the mirror, like there was a space between my face and its copy, and something had reached through it. I backed out and locked the door. I told myself it was chemical residue, a trick of light, a minor freak detail in a building full of them. By morning, the print was gone. But my supervisor called me into the hallway and asked why the bathroom mirror had been replaced overnight. I stared at him, confused. They hadn't replaced anything, not on my shift. He showed me a photo on his phone glass, spiderwebbed with cracks. A single, perfect, palm-shaped fracture at the center, like a hand had pressed too hard from the wrong side. That day, I started wearing gloves even when I didn't need them, just in case something tried to touch back. The highway outside my town is straight for miles, a long, dark ribbon that swallows headlights and spits them out at the next exit. I used to drive at home after bar close, the radio low, my thoughts louder than the engine. One night, my windshield kept fogging from the corners. It was early fall, not cold enough for that. I turned on the defroster. It cleared, then fogged again, forming a soft halo around my vision like breath on glass. Then I saw it. A smear on the passenger side, right at eye level, 3 thin streaks, dragged downward as if fingertips had slid slowly across the inside of the windshield. I stared at it, trying to remember if I'd ever touched that spot. I hadn't. I drove alone. I reached over while driving, wiped once with my sleeve. The streaks didn't fade. They darkened, like dampening old dirt. And when the defroster blew warm air, the fog returned and the marks sharpened. Fingerprints, not mine. Too long, too narrow. As if someone had been sitting there, leaning close to watch the road, leaving a trace every time the car vibrated. I told myself I was tired. I told myself the bar air was greasy. I told myself anything except what my body already knew. Then the smell came with soil and something sour, like flowers left in a vase too long. My headlights caught a reflective sign, mile 13. My chest tightened. That was the marker everyone in town talked about. A teenage crash years ago. A car that rolled into the ditch and burned before anyone could open the doors. I kept my eyes forward, breathing shallow. The passenger seat felt occupied, not by weight, but by attention. The air beside me felt dense, like standing too close to someone in a small elevator. I reached the next exit, pulled into a gas station under harsh white light, and turned off the engine. The silence hit like a wall. The streaks on the windshield were now clearer. It's not just 3 lines. 5. A full handprint pressed flat against the glass, fingers splayed, as if someone had braced themselves for impact. And beneath it, faintly, as the fog evaporated, I saw another Marcan oval smudge against the lower glass, like a cheek pressed there. I didn't sit in that car for long after that. I got out, locked it, stood under the lights like they could protect me. When I finally looked back through the window, the passenger seatbelt was clicked in. I never used that belt. And I never drove past mile 13 again without feeling something shift beside me. Quietly, like a reminder that some passengers don't need a door to get in. I rented a small basement apartment after my breakup because it was cheap and quiet and nobody asked questions. It had one long hallway, a low ceiling, and pipes that clicked like teeth when the heat turned on. The landlord said the previous tenant moved suddenly. He didn't say where. He didn't say why. Just avoided my eyes while handing me the keys. The first week was normal. The second week, I started waking up with bruises. Not scattered bruises from sleep, not random bumps. These were shaped, oval, even like a thumb on one side and 4 fingers on the other. One morning, I had a handprint bruise on my left forearm, as if someone had grabbed me hard enough to leave a mark, but not hard enough to wake me. The skin was tender, warm, and when I pressed it, it hurt like a memory. I searched the apartment for causes, sharp corners, bed frame, anything. There was nothing at that height. Nothing with that shape. That night, I taped my phone to a shelf facing the bed. I didn't want to film the dark. I wanted to film me. I slept badly. The air felt heavier than usual, as if the room had inhaled and refused to exhale. In the early hours, I woke with that strange sensation you get when you think someone is standing nearby. Not a sound, not movement, certainty. I opened my eyes to darkness and couldn't move at first. Sleep paralysis, I told myself. A trick of the brain. Then I felt pressure around my wrist. Not a pinch, not a numbness. A slow, deliberate tightening, like fingers closing. My breath caught. The pressure increased. I tried to pull away, and my arm didn't slide on the sheets. It was held. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel the shape of a hand, colder than my skin, strong in a way that didn't belong to air. When the pressure finally released, it didn't vanish like a spasm. It let go like a person choosing to. In the morning, the bruise was darker than the others and perfectly defined. I watched the footage. Most of the night was stillness and shallow breathing. Then, at 3:06 a.m., the blanket at the edge of my bed sank inward, as if someone sat there. A moment later, my arm lifted slightly, barely an inch, but enough to see it wasn't rolling on its own. It rose and held, suspended, then settled back down. No shadow crossed the frame. No figure appeared. Only the blanket dip, the arm rise, and the quiet certainty that something had been close enough to touch me. I moved out 3 days later. I didn't ask for my deposit. On my last trip, carrying a box toward the door, I caught sight of the hallway mirror. There was a handprint on it at shoulder height, faint and oily, like it had been there all along. I wiped it with my sleeve as I passed. The print didn't move. It only darkened, as if the glass had been waiting for my warmth to make it visible. My cousin worked security at an old apartment complex, one of those places with dim stairwells, buzzing lights, and doors that always seemed half closed, never fully shut. He asked me to cover his shift one weekend because he had to leave town for a funeral. He gave me one instruction: don't go to the laundry room after midnight. I laughed like a fool. He didn't. The first hours were quiet, just cameras and a clipboard and the sound of my own steps. At 12:34 a.m., one of the hallway cameras flickered, then went still. The feed froze on a frame of an empty corridor. I checked the system. Power was fine. Other cameras were fine. Then I noticed something on the frozen frame. A dark smear on the far wall, low to the ground, like a wet streak. I rewound the footage. The smear wasn't there a second earlier. It appeared in one frame like a blink. Like something had touched the wall and left a mark too fast for the camera to catch the hand. I looked up from the monitors and realized the air in the security office felt colder. Not the usual AC cold. A damp cold, like standing near a basement door. And that's when I smelled it. Detergent. And something underneath stagnant water, rust, and the metallic bite of old coins. My eyes drifted to the hallway outside the office. The laundry room sign was visible down the corridor, glowing softly. I told myself I was only going to check the camera junction. I told myself I had a job to do. The laundry room door was propped open an inch, as if someone had walked through and never bothered to close it. I pushed it wider. The room was empty. Rows of machines, single blinking red light on a dryer. The air was heavy with humidity. The floor was clean, too clean, like it had been scrubbed aggressively. Then I saw the wall. A set of fresh marks, low and horizontal, like something had been dragged. 4 lines, not from furniture. Too thin. Too precise. I stepped closer and my stomach turned. They weren't scuffs. They were fingernail marks pressed into damp paint as if someone had clawed while being pulled away. Above them, at adult chest height, was a single palm print in the paint dark. Glossy, perfectly shaped, like a hand had been pressed hard against the wall while someone fought not to fall. I backed up slowly. My heel bumped something soft. A laundry cart. Except the cart wasn't there when I walked in. I would have seen it. The room was small and the machines were aligned neatly. The cart was now directly behind me, close enough to touch my legs. I didn't look at it for long. I turned and walked out like my life depended on doing it calmly. On the way back, I glanced at the hallway wall near the office and saw the same dark smear from the frozen camera frame. Only now I understood what it was. A handprint. Dragged downward, as if someone had tried to stand and slid slowly toward the floor. I finished the shift without leaving the office again. I sat under the monitors and listened to the building breathe. In the morning, my cousin returned and saw my face. He didn't ask what happened. He only nodded, like he'd expected it. Later, I learned a woman had died in that laundry room years ago. Not murder, officially. An accident, a fall, a head injury. But the walls told a different story. And the dead, apparently, had kept the receipts. I took a part-time cleaning job at a small funeral home because I needed money and I told myself I could handle anything. I wasn't afraid of bodies. I was afraid of loneliness. And funerals, strangely, felt less lonely than my apartment. They assigned me the prep room twice a week. I mopped floors, wiped counters, cleaned glass cases. The director was polite, distant, and always left before the sun fully set. The first time I saw the mark, it was on the stainless steel table. A streak of moisture, like someone had dragged 2 fingers through a thin film of water. 2 parallel lines ending in a small pool, like a tear had fallen and been smeared. I wiped it. It returned an hour later. Then, one night, I noticed something worse. On the cabinet, where they stored personal effects watches, rings, letters, there was a smudged oval in the dust, a face print. Not the full features, but the outline of a forehead and cheek, as if someone had leaned their head against the cabinet door in exhaustion. I stood there, holding my rag, feeling the hairs on my arms lift. The air was colder, the lights were steady. The building was locked. I tried to explain it. Dust settles. People touch things. Maybe the director. Maybe me. But the oval print was too low, too awkward. And the dust around it was undisturbed, as if the face had pressed without disturbing the rest. I went to the hallway mirror to calm myself, to see my own eyes, and remind myself I was alive. There was a handprint on the mirror at shoulder height, a fresh one. And beneath it, faint but visible in the reflected light, were 5 thin lines down the glass, like fingers had slid slowly, leaving trails. I didn't think, I just walked out, leaving my supplies behind, leaving the lights on, leaving everything exactly as it was. The next day, the director called and asked if I'd been in the prep room late. He sounded careful, the kind of careful you use when you already know the answer and don't want to hear it. I said yes. He paused, then told me something he clearly didn't like saying out loud. Sometimes the family's asked to leave a note with the body. Sometimes the director forgets to remove it before closing the casket. Sometimes the dead don't like being separated from what they were meant to keep. Then he added, quietly, that if I ever saw marks on glass, I should not wipe them, 'cause some marks aren't dirt. They're attempts. When my grandfather died, we cleaned out his old house. It was a small place, 1 story, with faded curtains and a porch that creaked in a familiar way. He'd lived alone for years, and the house had that quiet, stale smell of solitude, old wood, cold ash, closed drawers. We worked all day. Boxes, trash bags, dust. In the evening, my family left, but I stayed behind to finish the last room. I wanted to do it properly. I wanted to feel like I'd done something for him, even after he was gone. His bedroom was the hardest. The bed still held the shape of his body, like the mattress remembered. The air felt colder in that room, even with the heat on. I opened the closet and found his coat hanging exactly where it always had. The sight of it hit me unexpectedly, like grief you didn't realize you were still carrying. I stepped back and leaned against the wall. My hand touched something tacky. I looked down. A smear, dark and glossy, on the wallpaper. Then I saw more. Finger marks low on the wall near the bed, as if someone had been bracing themselves, trying to stand, sliding their hand along the wall for balance. My throat tightened. I didn't want to connect it to anything. I didn't want to imagine his last moments. I didn't want to picture him reaching for the wall in the dark. I walked into the kitchen to breathe. The house was silent. No wind, no neighbors. Only the refrigerator hum and my own heartbeat. When I returned to the bedroom, the coat in the closet was gently swaying, not swinging like a draft, swaying like it had been touched. I stepped closer, and my eyes caught the mirror on his dresser. There was a handprint on it. Not dust, not a smudge. A full palm print, slightly darker than the glass, centered at the height of his shoulder. I stood there, feeling the room tighten around me, and suddenly the marks on the wallpaper made a terrible sense. They weren't random, they weren't stains. They were the record of someone reaching for something that wasn't there anymore. I didn't stay. I turned off the lights and left the house with the feeling that I'd walked out on someone who was still trying to make it to the door. A week later, when the realtor showed the house, she called and asked if anyone had recently painted the bedroom wall. She said there were weird fingerprints appearing through the fresh primer. The kind that looked like someone had pressed from underneath the paint. As if, even after death, he was still reaching for balance. The last story is mine, in a way the others aren't, because it followed me. After all those years, after all those places, I started noticing marks in my own home. Small at first, a fingerprint on a window I hadn't opened. A palm smudge on the fridge door when I lived alone. Then one winter morning, I woke to find a handprint on the inside of my bedroom window, perfectly formed in the condensation. I stared at it for a long time, trying to stay rational. Glass fogs. People touch things. Heat changes. Everything has an explanation. But I lived on the 3rd floor. Nobody could reach that window from outside, and the handprint wasn't mine. It was larger, the fingers longer, the palm wider, and there was something about it that felt too intentional. I placed my own hand next to it. My fingers didn't line up. My palm was smaller. My hand looked like a child's beside it. That's when I noticed something else. Just beneath the print, faint and almost hidden in the fog, was a second Mark V short lines, like the tips of fingers pressed lightly, like someone had been testing the glass, like they'd been trying, repeatedly, to push through. I didn't wipe it away. I didn't take a photo. I just stood there, breathing slowly, watching the condensation shift with my breath, watching the handprints stay. Then, as the room warmed and the fog began to clear, the print didn't fade like water. It darkened, as if what I'd been seeing all along wasn't moisture at all, but oil, or something older, something that didn't belong to morning. I left the window untouched for the rest of the day, because I realized the worst part isn't that the dead can leave marks. It's that sometimes the marks are the only proof they were ever there, and the only proof they're not gone.